I remember the day my life shattered as clearly as if it happened yesterday. My husband had always been the anchor of our home, the one who seemed unshakable in his love and dedication. We built a life together filled with laughter, family dinners, and dreams about our son's future. When he left for work in the mornings, he would kiss my forehead and whisper that he loved me. To me, that was enough proof that our marriage was strong and secure. We weren't perfect, of course, but what couple is? At least that's what I told myself. Then came the day everything collapsed. One ordinary morning turned into the darkest moment of my life when the phone rang, and a voice told me my husband was gone, taken from us suddenly by a heart attack. The shock hit me like a tidal wave. I couldn't process it, couldn't believe that the man I had loved for years would never come home again. I cried until my chest ached, holding on to our son as if clutching him would stop the world from crumbling. Together we stood in disbelief at the funeral, staring at a coffin that seemed far too small to contain a man with such a large presence in our lives. The days that followed felt like moving through water, slow and heavy. Every corner of our home reminded me of him. His favorite mug sat untouched on the counter. His jacket still hung on the back of the chair by the door. The silence in the evenings was unbearable without the sound of his voice filling the rooms. I tried to stay strong for my son, hiding my tears whenever I could, but the loneliness gnawed at me when the house grew quiet at night. I wanted to believe he had been the perfect husband, the devoted father, the man who had built our world with his hands and his love. Yet, in the stillness, doubts began to creep in. Small memories returned, ones I had brushed aside before. The late nights he claimed were spent at work, the hushed phone calls he would take in another room, the unexplained business trips that always seemed to come at inconvenient times. I told myself then that I was overthinking, that suspicion was poison, and that he loved me too much to ever betray me. But now, with him gone, those memories no longer felt harmless. They pressed at me, whispering questions I didn't want to face. My son, still young but sharper than I ever realized, seemed to carry his own burden after the funeral. He grew quieter, keeping to himself more often than usual, as though something weighed heavily on his mind. At first, I thought it was grief, the same grief that kept me awake at night. I wanted to comfort him, but he avoided my eyes, as if he was hiding something from me. The look on his face, that strange mixture of confusion and unease, unsettled me more than my own pain. I didn't know it then, but he had been carrying a truth that would shake the fragile image I still held of my husband. And when he finally found the courage to open his mouth, he would ask me a question that pierced through every memory I thought I could trust. Would you like me to continue with section 2, minimum 570 words, in the same narrative flow? That night, after days of silence between us, my son finally came to me. His face was pale, his eyes red as if he had been holding back tears. He hesitated at first, shifting uncomfortably in the chair across from me. I reached out, thinking he needed comfort, but instead of leaning into my arms, he looked at me with an expression that froze my heart. His voice trembled when he spoke, but his words were sharp, cutting straight through the fragile calm I had been trying to rebuild. "Mom," he whispered, "was Dad faithful to you?" For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. The question was so unexpected, so unthinkable, that I felt my chest tighten. I blinked at him, searching his face for some explanation. "Why would you ask me something like that?" I managed to say, though my voice cracked. He lowered his gaze, twisting his hands together nervously. "Because I found something before he died." His words landed like a stone in the pit of my stomach. He went on to explain that a few weeks before his father's death, curiosity had led him to open the phone his father left unattended. At first, he was just a boy curious about what games or pictures might be there. But what he stumbled upon was far from innocent. "I saw messages," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Messages with someone who wasn't you. There were pictures too, and things he wrote that didn't sound like something he would say to his wife." He winced as if ashamed to even repeat it. I didn't want to believe it. I thought maybe I misunderstood. But I kept it to myself because I didn't want to hurt you. Every word felt like a blade. My body went cold, my heart hammering in my chest as if I were being dragged into a nightmare. Denial rose instantly within me. "No," I said quickly, shaking my head, You must have misunderstood. Your father loved us, he loved me. He wouldn't, he couldn't, but even as I spoke, my voice faltered. I remembered the late-night phone calls, the sudden meetings, the way he sometimes came home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. At the time, I brushed it off. Now, those memories pressed down on me like undeniable evidence. Tears blurred my vision as I looked at my son, who sat there waiting, desperate for an answer that could restore the image of his father he had carried all his life. I wanted to protect him, to shield him from the possibility that his father had betrayed us both. Yet, deep inside, something cracked. Could it be true? Had the man I trusted above all others lived a life of secrets behind my back? I don't know, I finally whispered, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. I never had a reason to think he wasn't. But now I don't know. My son's shoulders slumped, as though hearing me admit uncertainty was worse than hearing a clear answer. He wiped his eyes roughly, his voice breaking. I wish I hadn't seen it. I wish I could forget it. But it's there, and I can't stop thinking about it. I pulled him into my arms then, even though my own body trembled. Inside, I was torn between disbelief and the sickening possibility that the child I was holding was right. If my husband had indeed been unfaithful, then every smile, every word of love, every memory we had built was stained by betrayal. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew I could no longer ignore the doubts. That night, after my son fell asleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by his question. Was my husband truly the man I thought he was? Or had his death hidden sins I was only beginning to uncover? One thing was certain, I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Do you want me to move straight into section 3, minimum 570 words, and start revealing the dark truth? The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest that refused to go away. My son's question had ripped something open inside me, and now the need for answers consumed me. I could not continue living in limbo, wondering whether the man I loved and mourned had been loyal or whether he had deceived me all along. I waited until my son left for school, then I walked into my husband's study, a place I had avoided since his death. His scent still lingered there, faint but familiar, and it almost broke me to breathe it in. I opened drawers, shuffled through files, and searched for anything that might explain the doubts gnawing at me. At first, all I found were old bills, business documents, and notes in his handwriting. For a brief moment, I convinced myself that maybe my son had been wrong. Maybe grief had distorted his memory. But then, tucked inside a folder of tax receipts, I found an envelope sealed loosely. Inside were receipts for hotel rooms I had never known about, all from dates when he had told me he was on work trips. My hands shook as I read them, the truth beginning to unfold in cold black ink. I couldn't stop there. I turned to his phone, which I had tucked away in a drawer since the day he passed. I powered it on, the screen lighting up with his face in the wallpaper. My heart ached at the sight, but I forced myself forward. I searched through his messages, scrolling carefully until I found a thread buried deep in the archives. My breath caught when I saw the name. It wasn't an unknown stranger, it was a woman I recognized, someone who had often been in our home, a family friend I had trusted. Their conversations left no room for doubt, words of passion, late-night promises, hotel meetings, gifts he had sent her with affectionate notes. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was a reality staring at me, mocking me. I dropped the phone onto the desk, pressing my hands against my face as the tears came uncontrollably. How long had this been going on? How many moments of our marriage had been a lie? I thought of the times I waited for him to come home, making dinner that grew cold on the table, believing he was working late for us. In truth, he had been with her, giving pieces of himself that belonged to me, to us as a family. My grief transformed into anger. Anger at him for betraying me, anger at her for stepping into a life that wasn't hers to touch, and anger at myself for never seeing the truth. I wanted to scream, to smash the phone, to erase everything I had just learned. But the evidence was undeniable, and the knowledge burned too deep to forget. The hardest part wasn't my own heartbreak, it was knowing my son had suspected this before me. He had seen his father in a light that no child should ever have to see. I thought about telling him everything, about handing him the truth so he could stop questioning. But another part of me hesitated. Would it break him even more to know the full extent of his father's betrayal? Would it shatter whatever fragments of love and respect he still held for the man he had lost? I sat in that study for hours, staring at the phone, the receipts, the undeniable proof of infidelity. My tears had dried, leaving me hollow, and all I could feel was the crushing weight of betrayal. I knew I couldn't carry this alone. Whether I wanted to or not, I would have to tell my son something. The truth was too heavy to keep buried, and secrets had already poisoned our family once. As I closed the drawer and turned off the phone, I realized the image of my husband, the man I thought I knew, was gone forever. All that remained was the truth, sharp and unforgiving, and the decision of whether to let my son see it too. Do you want me to continue with section 4, minimum 570 words, where the mother and son face the truth together and find closure? That evening, I sat at the kitchen table long after the dishes had been cleared away. My son was in his room, and I could hear the faint sound of him moving around, restless, just as I had been restless the entire day. My mind raced in circles. I had uncovered the truth, and it gnawed at me like an open wound. Keeping it from him felt dishonest, but telling him everything felt cruel. Yet he had already sensed the betrayal, already asked the question that demanded an answer. I could not let him live in uncertainty any longer. When he finally came into the kitchen, his eyes searching mine, I knew it was time. I gestured for him to sit, and for a moment, we both stayed silent, the weight of unspoken words filling the room. My voice trembled as I finally said, "You asked me if your father was faithful. I need to be honest with you. I went through his things today, and I found proof that he wasn't." He stiffened, his eyes widening as though he had hoped I would deny it, hoped that his fears were only a mistake. I continued, my words careful but heavy. There were messages, receipts, things he kept hidden. He had been involved with someone else. Someone we both knew. His face twisted in shock, and then in anger. He pushed back from the table, his fists clenched. "How could he do that to us?" he cried, his voice breaking. "He was supposed to love you. He was supposed to be here for me. How could he be that kind of man?" His pain sliced through me, and I wanted to hold him, but he pulled away, pacing the kitchen as tears streamed down his cheeks. "I don't know," I whispered. "I've asked myself the same questions all day. I thought our life was real, I thought his love was true. But sometimes people hide parts of themselves, even from the ones closest to them. I don't have answers, and I can't defend what he did. All I know is that his betrayal doesn't erase the love he showed us in other ways. It doesn't erase the years he spent being your father, even if he was flawed." My son turned to me, his face red and wet with tears. "It feels like everything was a lie," he said bitterly. "Every memory, every word he said, it all feels poisoned now." I stood and walked to him, placing my hands gently on his shoulders. "Not everything was a lie. He made choices that hurt us, yes, choices that destroyed the trust we had in him. But the moments he spent with you, the times he laughed with us, those were real. Betrayal doesn't erase the fact that he was still your father. We have to let ourselves grieve, not just for the man we lost, but for the illusions we believed about him." Slowly, he collapsed into my arms, his body trembling against mine. We cried together, our grief now doubled by the sting of betrayal. In that moment, I realized that we could only heal by facing the truth side by side. Hiding it would have left him to wrestle with doubts forever. Sharing it meant carrying the pain together, and that was the only way forward. Later that night, after he had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room, reflecting on everything. My husband had been two men, one who loved his family and another who betrayed it. Reconciling those versions of him felt impossible, but I understood now that I didn't have to carry the weight of his sins as my own. His choices were his, not mine, and not my son's. I knew healing would not be easy. The scars of betrayal run deep, and the questions may never truly leave us. But I also knew that by being honest, by confronting the truth instead of burying it, my son and I could start to rebuild something genuine, trust in each other, even if the foundation of our family had cracked. As I turned off the lights and prepared to face another day, I whispered to myself the lesson his betrayal had carved.